Welcome to Tech Brothers. In this video, we're going to learn how to install and configure SQL Server 2016 reporting services, and we'll be installing reporting services in native mode in this video. And prerequisites are .NET Framework 4.0, Microsoft Visual Studio 2010 redistributables, Microsoft Visual Studio 2010 shell. And this is just my recommendation that if you are installing SSRS in production, you should use a separate SSRS account, not use SQL Server Engine account. But you have a choice if you want to use that, but I don't recommend that. I always use separate accounts for all the services such as analysis services, engine services, and SSRS services and agent services, just a separate account. But this is just my recommendation. But if you do decide to use SSRS separate service account, then you need to have a password, because during the installation or later on in configuration, you would need the password for that account. So let's get into the installation part. Here's my server right here. This is where I'm going to install SSRS 2016. This is my installation media. All you need to do is open your installation media and right click and run as admin. But I have the landing page pre-populated right here because it takes a little bit of time. Just to save time, I already pre-populated this landing page. Click on installation. I'll be installing SSRS on existing installation because I already have SQL Server 2016 installed, but you do have a choice to install SSRS instance on a standalone, separate from where you have your SQL Server engine installed. Click on New SQL Server Standalone Installation or Add Features to an existing installation. You have a choice to skip this, but usually it doesn't take long. Well, I have everything probably there, so click next. Don't worry about that error message. And I'm going to add feature to an existing instance of SQL Server 2016. So I'm going to click here. But if you're installing SSRS on a standalone server where your SQL Server engine is not installed and you don't want it to be the feature of that current SQL Server engine, then you need to click on perform a new installation. But I'm going to click on add feature. And this is my SQL Server instance. If you have multiple instances, you will have in the drop-down menu 2016 instances right here, and you can choose which instance that you want to add this feature to. Right now, I have only one, so this is MS SQL Server right here. Click Next. All right. Feature selection page. These are the features I have already installed. Right now, my main motive is to just install reporting services in native mode. So click on reporting services native and click next. This is where you have a choice to provide your separate SSRS service account. You can leave this just exactly like this right now, and you can change it in configuration later on if you want to. But since I do have a separate account for SSRS, then I'm going to go ahead and configure that right now. Click OK and put the password right here. Click Next. You have a choice that right now it seems like everything is grayed out, but as you can see that you have choice to install and configure. What it means is if you click on install and configure, right after installation the configuration will pop up and you have to configure that. It'll kind of become the part of installation, but you can install it now and later on you can configure your SSRS instance. So I'm going to install it now and then we will go through the configuration later. Click next, and this is the summary. Click install, and installation is going to take a little bit time. I'll pause the video, and once installation is completed we'll get into the configuration of it. Alright, as you can see that SSRS native installation is completed, SSRS 2016. We will close this and get into the configuration now. Close this too. And I will search for the configuration. We need to get into Reporting Services Configuration Manager. Click yes. This is the instance where you just installed TechBrothersIT. This is the server that we installed, SSRS, and this is the report server instance right here. Click connect, and as you can see the services are running. If services are stopped, you will see the start button right here. Always, this is just my recommendation, that if you ever need to restart your SSRS services in 2016, you should come in SQL Server 2016 report server configuration and start and stop your services from here. Click on service account. This is the account I was talking about, that if during the installation, if you have chosen just the default one, you will see that this is selected and your NT authority or local system will be selected right here. Since I provided everything during the installation, it shows right here that my services are going to run, SSRS services are going to run with this account. So I'm going to leave it just like this, but you have a choice to click on built-in if you don't want to use a separate SSRS account. Click on web service URL. This is the virtual directory right here. If you ever wanted to install multiple instances, if this virtual directory is already created on the system, this will give you error that this virtual directory cannot be created and you have to rename that. And as soon as you rename this, your URL will be changed up here too. This is just default setting. This is the default setting of SSRS. The port and the virtual directory. Since this is a new installation, so we're going to just leave it just like this, report server and TCP port 80. Click apply, always apply, otherwise a pop-up will appear saying that you're moving to the next configuration without applying the previous one. Click apply. Alright, as you can see that we have the URL right here. If your application is accessing this SSRS instance and they need to configure it in their config file, this is the URL that you have to provide to your application developers, because the other web portal URL will be just for users who are just browsing directly your SSRS instance. This is the URL that needs to be in the config file of an application that provides the front-end interface to run these reports using SSR services on this instance. Click on database, and since this is brand new installation, we're gonna create the database. But if this SQL Server instance is ever gonna take a part into the scale out deployment, you need to click on existing database, click on change database first. and you have choice, create a new report server database. We'll be using this choice, but if this is going to be part of the scale out, you need to choose existing SQL Server report database, and you would need the encryption key to basically restored to have this SQL Server SSRS instance to be part of that scale out deployment. Click next, and this is the SQL Server right here, server name, and this is the user that will go and connect to the database and retrieve all the information for you. Make sure that this account does have permission to go and create the database in SQL Server and retrieve all the information. Click on test connection, whether you can connect with SQL Server or not. Test connection succeeded. Click next. This is the database name. You have a choice. If this database already exists, you can rename it right now, but this is brand new installation, so I'm gonna just leave it like that. Click next. Credential, what credential you wanted to use. Specify the credential of an existing account that report server will use to connect to the report server database. This is the credential. These are the credentials that will be used to connect to the database. Again, make sure that your account, whatever account that you're using right here, I'm using service account. You do have a choice to use Windows credential that are different from the service account, and they'll go and connect to the report server database, or you can use the SQL Server authentication account that has permission to go and connect to that database. Since I know that service account has the permission to connect to the database, I'm going to just leave it just like that. Click next. This is just the summary. Click next, and this will start configuring this part. All right, everything is successful. Click finish. Click on web portal URL. Again, this is the virtual directory. Look at the URL right here. This is the URL that you will get if you will use this virtual directory. And if this virtual directory is already taken, you will get an error that this virtual directory already exists. It cannot create it. But this is the URL that will face the users who are going to browse this instance from Internet Explorer or any other browser directly, not for application config file or application front end. Click on apply. Everything is successful. Click on email setting. If you wanted to send an email from this instance, from SSRS, you can set up your SMTP settings right here. I don't have any, so I'm just gonna leave this alone. This is the execution account. This is very, very important. If your reports actually have any part of your report that goes to another server and connect and fetch the data from another server, just for example, that you have images that is sitting on a share, your SQL Server, your SSRS service account doesn't have permission to go there. This is where you need to specify that account that has permission to go fetch all those images that will show up in your report. Otherwise, your report execution will fail. This does not include the user that is going to run the reports, but inside the reports, if the report needs to, it's defined that go onto that server and fetch that image or whatever the case may be on another server. This is where you need to define that account. Otherwise, your report will not work. Right now, I don't have any, so I'm not going to specify anything. Encryption key right here. So first time when you see the configuration, you will have these options. But if this is going to be the part of the scale out configuration, which is right here, Scale out is basically you have one common database and you have multiple SSRS instances, and you can access all the reports on any instance. This is SSRS is not cluster aware, so this is how we give the DR or disaster recovery or other servers to be able to access all the reports that is residing on one database. So multiple SSRS instances pointing to the same database. Then you need to know the encryption key of the primary server or the server that is already existed. But since this is a new installation, always back up your key because you might need it later. You can click on back up the key. You have right now choice not to do anything, but I would recommend that go ahead and back up your key, that later on if you need to change your configuration or database, maybe point to another database, then you would need that that key. So I'm not gonna back up right now. This is just a demo, but once you click on backup, it'll ask you the file and the password, and this is pretty simple. Click on subscription setting. If you wanted to have subscription and you have a file share that where you would like to put all those reports, or where user can go and access those reports that subscription has put down there, this is where you need to specify the account that can write to that file share and all that. Scale out deployment, as I said, that if this is going to be part of scale out deployment, or if this is the master server and all others are connecting to this, you will see that you have an option right here to click on add server, and you will add that newly SSRS instance that you just created. You can add that here and it'll be joined, so all the reports that resides in that database will be accessed by different instances. Power BI, this is a new feature. This is basically for Azure, that if you have Azure Active Directory and you have tenant users in Azure Directory, you can basically register right here, so that all the reports, that some of the reports or all the reports, whatever the user decide to do to show it on their dashboard, this is where you register. This is for Azure users who wanted to show the reports on their dashboard. You can configure it right here. I don't have that, so I'm not gonna configure that. Click exit. Our configuration is basically completed. If we exit it and go back to the configuration, we'll click on web URL and see if we can connect to our report server. I'm going to copy it right here first. And just leave it like that and click exit and provide the password right here for the user. This will assure you that if our configuration is working right, then we'll get out of this server and access this report instance using web browser from another server. As you can see that this is working fine, but we'll go out of this server. We'll copy this URL. That URL, user-facing URL, who are going to use browser to access your SSRS, they will use the same URL but not the server part, just reports, as I've shown you in the configuration file. So I'm going to minimize this and open Internet Explorer right here, paste this URL right here, and just leave this part, reports, and see if we can connect to our reporting services. As you can see, my user is cluster admin, and we are successfully connected with SSRS instance that we just created. This is homepage. This does look a little bit different than we're used to in SQL Server 2014 and 2008 R2, but our installation and configuration is successful.